Tēnā koutou na mihi nui ki a koutou I tēnei rā. I ngā mana, I ngā reo, I ngā karangatanga maha. Kei te mihi, kei te mihi, kei te mihi. Ki a koe, Professor Dame Jane Harding, tēnā koe. Ki a koe ahurangi Professor Angus McFarlane, tēnā koe. Kia ora I te whānau, kua hoki mahi, tēnā koutou. Well, kia ora everyone. It's really such an honour to be elected as a Fellow of the Royal Society, so thank you very much indeed for this privilege. Of course, as a researcher, you never research alone. You always research with a team, and I've had the great privilege to work with fantastic colleagues over the years, and working in school communities and early childhood centres with teachers and speech language therapists and in Māori communities, and it's been a wonderful privilege. So a lot of people to thank, and firstly though I do want to thank and acknowledge my whānau that are here today. It's great to have you here, Lewis, my son. Lewis was actually my postdoc baby. I thought it was a good reason to take on a postdoctoral fellowship with a very young baby, and then fly around the country working with speech language therapists at the same time. But you survived. And just really acknowledge your support, and also of my daughter Grace, who's in Australia as a young doctor at the moment, but you've both been a true inspiration to my work. And to my whānau, Lee here, my sister, is representing our family here today from Christchurch, so thank you, Lee. To my colleagues that are here, Professor McNeil and Dr. Scott, that I work closely with in our current projects, and also of course to Professor Angus McFarlane, who has been a great influencer of my work, and to two lifetime friends that are here today, Barbara and Andrea. You've probably heard a lot of stories about my research, but wonderful to have you all here. And also just want to acknowledge whānau in Christchurch that couldn't be up here today, but also to my late husband, Philip, who's always been a really strong supporter of my research over the years, and my dear late father, who has probably been my biggest fan in my research over time. And of course also acknowledging my colleagues in the Better Start National Science Challenge and from the University of Canterbury. So my area of research, I think professors sometimes know quite a bit about a tiny little subject area. So my subject area has been really understanding the importance of phonological awareness, and that's really about how children can process and understand the sound structure of their spoken language and how that contributes to their early reading and to their spelling success. And what's really interested me over time is how children develop this phonological awareness, and in particular for children that might have more challenges with their early literacy development. So over the years I started out firstly looking at older children with dyslexia, and through the great mentorship of Professor Barbara Dodd, who's a world leader in phonology, she was my supervisor for my PhD, and we discovered through some phonological awareness intervention trials that just even a small amount, 20 hours, of explicit and direct teaching in helping young children to hear about the sound structure of their words and relate that to the written process, how quickly they improved in both their reading accuracy and their reading comprehension. And this really did receive quite a bit of international recognition, because it was one of the first trials in school-based trials where we supported literacy specialists to implement the intervention to get such really quite dramatic improvements in reading. So then when I came back here to do my postdoc, started coming down in the age group, because we all know about the struggle that poor readers have over time. So how could we prevent that struggle for those at risk for dyslexia or other types of literacy challenges? And then of course I met Bridget McNeil, and we undertook a number of studies looking at phonological awareness and the importance of that for reading and spelling in young children with speech and language difficulties. And that then moved into, up until that point, most of our work was in small groups and individual therapy sessions, but of course the real impact comes when we can help change classroom practice and support teachers to be really developing these critically important skills in our young tamariki. So with Dr. Karen Carson, who was one of my former PhD students, we started looking at class-wide impact of phonological awareness instruction. And now that has led through to our work in the Better Start National Science Challenge, where we've developed a Better Start literacy approach that's really supporting our teachers use really strong evidence-based practice in their classes to help children's development in oral language, and in particular in their phonological awareness. So moving from really quite small studies right through to large-scale implementation. And up until till about 2007 or 8, I was following a pretty much traditional science approach, looking at pilot studies, feasibility studies, controlled intervention trials, randomised controlled trials. But then I met Professor McFarlane, and that really took me on quite a different trajectory with my work. Because through Angus and his colleagues and the work that you introduced me to, Angus, really started to see that we needed to be integrating knowledge streams, and the importance of, yes, understanding our more traditional science methodologies, but the critical importance of looking at Indigenous Māori knowledge streams and Indigenous science, and in particular Te Ao Māori, and integrating research methodologies from kaupapa Māori, and seeing how that, to actually evaluate the effectiveness of our work, we really needed to be looking at knowledge streams coming from both knowledge streams together. So that then started us on really thinking more about different knowledge streams. Traditionally I'd moved through the cognitive one in the middle, but really starting to understand the importance, particularly for our Māori learners, of strong whānau engagement, culturally relevant ways of working, the importance of strengths-based approaches and moving away from more deficit models that we'd previously worked upon. But working instead in strengths-based frameworks and looking at what facilitates success, particularly for our young Māori and Pasifika learners where we were working. So that then, all of that sort of fed into our current research work, which is a framework that we've developed at the University of Canterbury with other colleagues as well, that's really looking at the best start possible for young children's reading and writing, because we know the power of early reading and writing success. So we've developed an approach for our Year 1 teachers and developing that through to Year 3 as well, Year 3 teachers, that's much more strengths-based and culturally responsive ways of uplifting our children's literacy. Developing new online assessments that Dr. Scott has been doing a great job leading some really innovative ways and strengths-based ways of monitoring our young children's early literacy development that honours the successes that they're getting, that celebrates those next steps for learning, and that support teachers to understand that learning journey early on so that we can put in the right supports early and help prevent the struggle that we see with reading difficulties. So I knew this audience would like a bit of a graph to have a look at some of our findings. This was from our pilot study of the Better Start literacy approach, where we had children in Christchurch with low levels of oral language. So these were children, they actually were born in the year of our devastating earthquakes, and so that all of their preschool period had been severely disrupted in terms of their learning. And so they were coming into school. These were in low socioeconomic communities that had been really very severely affected by the earthquakes, and their oral language skills were quite low coming into school. So we wanted to see how we could really accelerate their early literacy learning. So the top line, the blue line, is 71 children with low levels of oral language who received the phonological awareness through the Better Start literacy approach first. And you can see just after 10 weeks of teaching, at that first time point, the children in the other classrooms represented by the red line, the blue line was significantly higher. So just showing the benefit of the Better Start literacy approach in accelerating learning. And then when the bottom line, the strand B children received the Better Start literacy approach, they started to catch up. So a really powerful way of showing how important it is for early literacy success, and that it can be a really powerful protective factor in children's learning. And we've been looking at what that social value is of that research. And so by taking 1 year of the Better Start Literacy approach, the Impact Lab here in Wellington have been looking at, for those 189 children, what was the social value added by accelerating their early literacy. And so if you follow those steps up through the trajectory that early literacy success gives us through to higher educational achievement, stronger mental well-being, higher employment opportunities, you see the value added of starting well in the literacy journey, and also helping to reduce other types of negative outcomes that we've seen in the past from children with persistent reading difficulties. So really just to, if you want to find out more about the Better Start Literacy approach, you can go online and find out there, but really just want to thank my colleagues that have worked with me over the years in this work, and the Better Start National Science Challenge through our recent funding work as well. And again, to thank the Royal Society. I'm really excited to become part of the Society. I'm really looking forward to contributing to the mission of the Society and sharing knowledge and advancing science excellence for the benefit of our tamariki here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.